So there was an election in Mexico recently, and there was lots of violence. And obviously, violence in Mexico is like rain in British summertime. It's nothing really of note. It's expected at this point, but it was a particularly violent one. I just wanted to have a little look at it because I find it interesting. There are lots of lessons to be learnt about the effect of a breakdown in civil society and the effect it has on politics. And also when criminal gangs reign supreme, which we're increasingly seeing in the West a lot of the time.
So this is going to be a pro-Bukele segment then?
Unintentionally, yes. But yes, believe it or not, if you crack down on criminal gangs and cartels, your country gets safer and things get better.
Yeah.
And
how many assassinations will there be in the next El Salvadorian
hopefully
elections?
a big fat zero.
Yeah.
But here are the results, and I'm going to sort of explain that there was a presidency race. This is also for the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies, but there were 20,700 federal and local positions being elected. So it's a big election,
right?
And I'm going to explain some of the parties, just the main ones, really. So
they're all communists, aren't they?
Not all of them, but some of them are very left-wing.
Not all of them? Oh, good.
So Morena, the top one here that did fairly well, they're sort of described by the mainstream media as centre-left, therefore they're probably socialist. And they've been the ruling party since 2018. And they're also the party with the largest amount of membership as well. Right. And there was a coalition, a sort of right and right-centre coalition between PAN there, which stands for the National Action Party, which is conservative, supposedly, and PRI, or the Institutional Revolutionary Party, which is the party of the Mexican Revolution. And they held power between 1929 to 2000.
Right.
Obviously not democratically. But
together they can't even get half the seats of the commies.
Yes. And there are some interesting questions about how this has come to be.
Right.
So, first of all, here is Los Angeles on the day of Mexico's general election, and you might notice a very long line, and you're just like, hang on a minute, surely it's not going all the way to Mexico.
It's election day, is it? Yeah, for Mexicans.
This doesn't go all the way across the border, all the way to Mexico. This is the first election, I think, in Mexico, if I read it correctly, where citizens living abroad could vote. And as you can see...
A lot of them in Los Angeles decided.
Yes, and also Chicago as well.
Right. That's interesting because the SNP in the referendum, the Scots who don't live in Scotland weren't allowed to vote, even if we live in England. Like, I live in England. It's the same country, but we weren't allowed to vote in the referendum, even though we're the ones who've left Scotland and know what the rest of the UK is like. And are probably a bit less xenophobic and anti-English because... well,
that's why they don't want you voting.
Yeah.
Well, they knew that you would vote against it, right?
Yeah.
Like my granddad was Scottish. Well, he's not alive anymore, but he still was. And I asked him why he left Scotland, and he's just like, well, England's like Scotland, except everything's better.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said
to
me.
It's like a step on the way to Australia or America.
I asked Dank about this. The SNP is still wildly anti-English. He was just like, well, obviously.
Yeah.
It's just their
thing they got.
It's the pillar of their politics.
Yeah.
We hate the English. So, thanks, Scotland.
Nationalism.
Wait until they find out we're not that bad. So, there was also this. There have been lots of attacks on voting stations, and this was obviously done by the cartels. I don't think we need to look for a culprit. It's pretty obvious in Mexico. If something bad happens, the cartels are something to do with it. And this raised lots of questions because, of course, they're targeting specific voting stations, perhaps with election data. But they're just trying to influence the election to their favour, right? That's what they're doing. It seems pretty uncontroversial.
Are they targeting conservatives, the Conservative Coalition here then?
Well, we'll be getting on to that.
Oh, sorry.
There is a long list that we're going to go through.
They're not just being indiscriminate.
It seems like it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They just hate democracy.
Well, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, maybe they do.
Like people who pay them, I think, is the way it works.
Right. Yeah.
But here is another article. Mexico's drug cartels and gangs appear to be playing a wider role in Sunday's election than before. And they seemed to take a much stronger line, all of the cartels, in trying to target the democratic process, which obviously is a legitimate problem because
Well, yeah.
violent gangs using violence to influence democracy is not a good thing. I know, extremist over here.
The idea that this is in any way controversial to say is mad.
Mm-hmm. I'm making sure to outline it very clearly because I know there are certain censors on certain platforms, like YouTube, that will tell me off for saying these sorts of things.
Well, no, we're against the interference of
elections.
We are, yeah. We don't think people should be murdered when they're trying to vote.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of murders...
Far-right opinion.
Here we go. Just before the actual election day, I think it was 37. I've also seen 38 banded around, but 37 is the one I could confirm. 37 candidates
that's not even just
were
voters.
Assassinated. Yeah.
That's not, because you think, okay, well, tens of thousands of people going to the polls, okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Cartels kill some people. But these are assassinations of candidates.
Yes. And that beats out the 2021 midterms by one assassination. So that was 36 candidates assassinated. But that was a previous record. So they broke their record. Well done, cartels. You've been very evil this year.
And is there any is there a coordinated reason? Are they all being killed because they're part of a bloc that wants to clamp down on the cartels or something?
Well, it's not clearly targeting a specific political party. So what I'm imagining they're doing is they don't really care about the actual politics side of it. What they want is people who are in their pocket, who are going to treat them favorably. Right. It doesn't really matter what party they're in. Yeah. If you threaten their family, if they're corrupt and want money, you can have any political ideology. That's a sort of human condition. And so in many ways, if they target people indiscriminately, it's actually harder to find out what they want as well, because they're not aligning themselves with a specific political party, and therefore you can't say that's the party of the cartel and vote them out. So they seem to know what they're doing, and it has been argued here on Al Jazeera, of all places, that the election results are a victory for organised crime.
Well, it looks like it too.
Yeah, it's this left-wing party that has succeeded, the one that's been in power since 2018, and if you'll
definitely be hard on crime.
Yes, and the fact that they've been in power for so long seems to indicate that certain forces in Mexico are pretty content to operate under their authority. And here we have a list of all of the people who have been assassinated. And I'm not going to... Obviously, the political party. There are people from Morena and PAN and PRI as well. So these are the main three parties. And in fact, this goes through chronologically.
Yeah, there's quite a few Morena ones. So
So things like armed assailants kidnapped and killed, former mayor, member of Citizens Movement, ambushed and shot after dropping off his son near a school, I presume. Had previously been kidnapped while his sister was mayor, killed while walking near his residence at 9 a.m, driving down a highway, fatally shot. And you've got every kind of assassination here. So the risk of running for office in Mexico, like fatally shot in a gym there.
I mean, this really does just validate everything Bukele did in El Salvador. Like the liberal media was just whining. How can you just arrest all of these gang members? It's like, because otherwise you'll end up in a condition like this.
This one was surprising to me. A trans woman and activist who was candidate for Regidora. She was shot by armed assailants while working at a clothing store. So it has been confirmed that the cartels are transphobic. So maybe the US is actually going to do something about them now.
Yeah, there's another one directly below.
Really?
Yeah. A trans woman who was shot by armed assailants riding.
Oh, well, there we go. It seems like the Biden administration is actually going to target the drug cartels now.
Well, yeah, because Trump was talking about actually sort of sending the army in to deal with the cartels.
Is it not validated? Like, is it not a good idea?
But the problem is,
how many candidates have to be assassinated before they're like, okay, we have to do something about this?
Some of the cartels have like special forces grade equipment. I've seen, was it CJNG or NJ, something like that. They are kitted out with, silenced machine guns, and they have the full works, all the kit, sort of armored APCs. They've got it all. They've got mounted machine guns. It looks like an army. In fact, they look better equipped than the Mexican army, to be honest.
Probably are. That's probably why the Mexican army hasn't dealt with them.
And it really puts
Yeah.
Scottish drug dealers to shame. They're trundling around some grey estate with an
ice cream van.
Yeah.
Got a shotgun and an ice cream
Getting
van.
all these dirty £10 notes.
I think at worst you could hope for a knife in Scotland, perhaps.
Yeah,
My dad tells me, right?
Yeah.
So the list carries on here,
Yeah.
and it does seem to be people from every party. So it does just seem to be trying to get
You're right.
dirt on people. There's no clear trend here.
It seems to be an attack on the very concept of governance in Mexico, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, the cartels want to be the sort of de facto rulers, don't they?
Obviously. Yeah.
They want the government, the formal government, to be the public face.
I don't know much about them, but they seem to just be essentially warlords.
It does work that way. They have a territory,
Yeah.
they have trade. You upset the trade
They kill
and you have consequences, and it's very hierarchical. Basically all gets funneled to one person or a couple of people. So it is that sort of model. So I wanted to have a look at what all of this bloodshed was in favor of, and what it was in favor of was the cartels clearly are really devout feminists, because what it resulted in is the first female president of Mexico,
right?
And she was what's her name again? I can't remember it. That's not good, is it? But she
Claudia
Sheinbaum.
Bulgarian, descended from Bulgarian Jews who fled the Holocaust, I believe.
Really?
I
Went to
think
Mexico,
Yeah.
It's even worse, isn't it? Going to Mexico, you're even less safe. But she was the head of government at Mexico City, which is normally what Mexican presidents have done prior to becoming a president. So that's pretty standard stuff.
Yeah.
Seems like she was a favorite. And also she took over from the incumbent president who wasn't allowed to run again because of constitutional laws. They can run.
Are both those pictures her? That looks like a sort of before and after at
that's the
No,
opposite.
it's opposition.
Ah, right.
Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a woman
Either
either
the
way.
before or the after. That's what you're voting for.
But yes, she has a PhD in energy engineering. So you'd think, okay, well, she might be a raging lefty, but at least she'd be competent on energy policy. But no, she won a Nobel Peace Prize co-authoring a report on how to mitigate climate change. So I think she's planted her flag there a little bit.
And was that, I take it, the solution to climate change was lots of communism?
It was, yeah.
It always is.
It was also be funded by the cartels. If I end up dead tomorrow, by the way, you know what happens.
Communism and cocaine is the solution to climate change.
She also identifies as a feminist and supports LGBT rights. So, yes.
Sure, the cartels really care about that.
And, of course, as Leo pointed out, she is Jewish, which is interesting because it might change Mexico's position on Israel. Because, of course, previously Mexico joined the ICJ's genocide case, which was launched by South Africa. And the incumbent president refused to define Israel's actions as genocide, but he supported South Africa in pursuing the claim, which is a little bit confusing because it's got it in the word, in the title. But they seem to be very much aligning with Palestine.
Yeah.
And she's not really said anything about that. And because Mexico is one of the major backers of this prosecution, it might actually change the way things are going in that realm if she chooses to change the approach. And
to be fair, Mexico seems to have more pressing problems.
It does,
in Gaza.
I don't really know why they have
all
a
country like releasing statements on Gaza.
But people in Mexico seem to care quite a lot about it for some reason,
right? Okay.
Because they set fire to Israel's embassy a few days ago at the end of May. There it is, just a flaming mess.
Want peace.
But why do people in Mexico care about Palestine?
I don't know. I don't know why people care about it here.
Well, I don't.
Anywhere in Europe, really.
No.
But it's also worth mentioning as well that there have been accusations of corruption. And I'm not alleging this. I'm not alleging this. This is other people alleging it. But there's a province in Mexico, I think it's on the border with Guatemala, called Chiapas or something like that. It's in the name there.
Yeah.
And 515 candidates dropped out of the race, and there were 5 attacks in 4 days against the candidates. So very dangerous area. And then I spotted this in this article here. So it's talking about the electoral violence. And then it mentions the now president going in this province, and it says, even Claudia Sheinbaum, the presidential frontrunner, this was written before she won, was not spared by confrontation in the state when her convoy was stopped at a checkpoint in a municipality that I can't pronounce in April by men who delivered a strong message. Remember these mountains, the poor people, when you're in power. Which is very different than shooting her in the head.
Yeah.
It's kind of saying, remember your loyalties. If you were inclined to believe that she was in the pocket of the cartels. And it's not just, random people speculating. Vicente Fox, who is a former president of Mexico, decided to jam his caps lock in writing about this. Right. And he's basically arguing, and this is what this says here, that she is starting a dictatorship by electoral fraud since she would never win a landslide victory above all other elections. And it's interesting. This is a former president. Obviously, he's ideologically opposed to her.
Sure.
But it's interesting that he's so forcefully putting it forward. I don't know too much about what he believes. I don't know whether he's right. But
37 people were killed trying to stand for office.
Yes, and one would imagine that just by the fact that so many people have been pressured either to step down or been killed, that the people who do get into office are more likely, I'm not saying they are definitely, but they're more likely to be in the pocket of the cartels. And it's interesting to me that politics functions in this way, because my main point is that when civil society breaks down and gangs start to, govern how politics operates, this is what we're going to get. We're going to get potentially rigged elections and lots of murders and pressure. Certainly not free and fair.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't describe this as a free and fair, secure election, could you?
No.
Christ.
And
one candidate dying would make it, throw it into doubt.
Yeah.
37, new record. That's mad.
But I think that in Western countries, we're going to see things increasingly become more like this. Obviously, we've got criminal gangs, and although it's not necessarily the same sort of business model as the cartel, in the Western world, it's more along ethnic lines. There are sort of ethnic gangs.
We're going to see sectarian, like people are already voting. People are voting. You see the billboards in Birmingham, like vote for me, I'll sort out Gaza. It's like, what, Birmingham's in Gaza now?
And
I know Gaza's a terrible place with terrible infrastructure, but it's nowhere near as bad as Birmingham.
And it was the mayor of Birmingham as well. It's not even an MP. He's not going to become prime minister one day. He's the mayor of Birmingham. What are you going to do for Gaza?
Yeah. Interestingly, Russia has a huge influence over South Africa. So it pretty much controls the ANC through this manganese mine.
Oh, really?
So I think more than half of the ANC's funding comes via Russia, via this manganese mine. So and Russia's obviously trying to sow division and discord and pit countries against the West. So I think that's why they pushed South Africa to do the court case.
Well, the Russians have been trying to get influence in Africa for a very long time. They were, they had the Wagner group in North Africa for a little while.
Yeah.
Trying to undermine.
Now the whole Sahel is pretty much Russian controlled now.
Yeah, well, they pushed out the French, didn't they, in Niger, because they were doing anti-terror activities, which you think the Russians would be in favour of, because they get targeted by terrorists as well.
About that, it's about influence.
It is about influence, yeah. And so I think that that's all tied in together. But I don't think that there's necessarily any foreign influence here. I think it's all domestic. I think that it's the cartels shaping things. And this is sort of a cautionary tale that if you don't deal with these problems, if you allow civil society to break down, then you're going to have lots of assassinations. You're going to have a sort of banana republic, one might say.
Don't let gangs run riot in your country.
Yeah.
They've got to be stamped out.
And also with climate change, coca plants are going to be grown in Devon. So
nice. So
it's going to
going back home then, I'm going to make some money.
Devon cartel.
And if you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go on down to lotuseaters.com, where you can find Connor's series and the famed interview with Liz Truss. If you want to see what the mainstream media has been talking about in our interview, make sure to check it out. And if you want to see what other work we're doing, you can also go to our Twitter account, where we share links to everything else. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.